The Buffalo Sabres just made a huge statement after Game 4. After taking a commanding 3-1 series lead from back-to-back wins in Boston, the Sabres are proving they don't need to be bigger, stronger, or more physical like Marco Sturm suggested. Rather, a new formula that best fits the Sabres game, that not only has allowed them to take the stranglehold on the series, but might even force handshakes at KeyBank Center in Game 5. Hello and welcome, my name is Ryan Lee, and welcome to Sabres Digest. All things Buffalo Sabres will be here, your latest news, updates, reactions, and more. So follow along for the journey by hitting subscribe down below. It really means a lot to us, and thank you so much for watching. So you take a look at Game 4 in Boston, and not only is it a back-to-back set of wins for Buffalo, a much-needed one in this playoffs, but they've all gone for completely different scripts. You have Jeremy Swayman carrying Boston on their back to no avail because the Sabres won Game 1. Game 2, where they finally punched back. Game 3 was a much tighter contest that really could have gone either way. And then you have Game 4, which has just been nothing more of flat-out domination. This is Money Puck's deserve to win-o-meter, which is essentially all the events on the ice. You take those together and you see how much did this team really deserve the win. And it's very obvious that Buffalo straight up dominated this game with an over 80% deserve to win. Considering that they really were in control all three areas of the ice, one of the things that really lacked from the Sabres throughout this entire playoff run was the start. They haven't had a goal in the first half of a game all series until today. Take a look at some of the quotes from some of the Sabres personnel between head coach Lindy, Ruff, Peyton, Krebs, and Zach Benson. They're talking about things from how the first period was the best period they played all year. The attack, intent, and speed was some of the key points that Lindy Ruff made. Peyton Krebs said that those starts were actually holding the team back, followed by Zach Benson following up on that. But being on pucks, hounding it, forcing turnovers, and capitalizing opportunities have been some of the things that the Sabres have really lacked in the early portion of the game. Now that they finally figured out those components, now that they finally put those pieces together, it has really allowed them to take the game, that pond hockey, quote-unquote, style that has really been kind of memed after and kind of talked about throughout the year. And it's finally kind of been coming to a head here, where you have that river hockey style, the fluidity, the motion, the speed of it all. And then you finally add in that physicality aspect, the aggressive forecheck, being really gritty on both ends of the ice, something Sabres fans have been longing for a long time, that grit, griminess. It's all finally coming together, and it held up to fantastic results at the start of Game 4. 4 goals to start in period number 1, followed by the 2 goals in the third, which was essentially a 6-0 game before you had that goal at the end of regulation, sure. But this was easily the Sabres' best start, hands down across the board. And one of the big things I want to note with the Sabres scoring breakdown, 6 different goal scorers. We talked about depth in the last video, how they needed pieces from other places to contribute and finally have their way in this offense, and they did. Beck Malenstein getting on the sheet, Bowen Byram doing it again from the defense, Josh Doan and Zach Benson finally getting the board, Peyton Krebs, he was a fourth liner all year, but he's been that third guy with Tuch and Thompson, and now he's finally showing his value in the playoffs in a different way. He's been in those physical places. He's been getting into plays. Now he's finally getting on the score sheet. And the depth of the Sabres was one of the real superpowers of this team, how they could just find players to contribute up and down the lineup. And after Game 4, that trend continues. In Game 4, you have 12 different players getting a point in this game. Of course, you can attribute it to the 6-1 scoreline, but you can't take away how much the contributions up and down the lineup have really mattered to the Sabres team throughout the entire year. And it helps when you have the full complement of players on the ice at any given moment. Part of Boston's strategy, I feel like, going into this playoff was to get some of these guys off of the ice. Get them into penalties, get them into these end of whistle scrums, get physical with them, get bodies on bodies. That's what Marco Sturm wanted. And once that finally got away from them, where they couldn't really just overly penalize Buffalo Sabres, where you couldn't just have 4-on-4s or maybe that extra little whack at the end to make it a Boston power play, they weren't getting those at all. I think this was the game where the referees finally said, okay, enough is enough. And they sent kind of a warning shot to both teams that everything that happened in the first 2 games will no longer fly. And believe it or not, that actually went advantage Buffalo. And you can see here, 3 total penalties in the first 2 periods, and then you have this barrage in the final 5 minutes, which kind of stems from that cheap shot that Nikita Zadorov took on Rasmus Dahlin, that cross-check at the end. Number 1, that's not only slimy, but number 2, that is a signature of a frustrated team that knows they're not getting opportunities. They're not getting chances. This was a team that was nearly shut out for 2 whole games, and they couldn't get anything past Alex Lyon. And that is a frustrated team who is finding literally anything to take it out on. And they wanted to try to do that to Dahlin to no avail. The Sabres wouldn't buy into that game this time around. They wouldn't do it. And I think it's part of what frustrated the Bruins the entirety of the game, where they couldn't get anything done in their own end. Even when you look at some of the opportunities that the Sabres had, 35-14 being the shot differential, for example, or even staying out of the box more than Boston has, not receiving some of these silly calls at the end of games or end of moments where you're losing a guy on the ice. You might even lose guys for a game. That is where Buffalo thrives. They thrive when they have all their pieces in place. They complement each other really well. And how about some of the efforts from the defense? Bowen Byram getting on the score sheet. Owen Power, I'll do a segment on him in the next video because he has been lights out in this series so far. And it really shows that Buffalo has matured throughout the series. This is something I talked about in the last video also. They've really grown into their game as this series has gone along. This is not a flash in the pan. This is not a flame out. This is the Sabres building throughout the postseason the same way that they were building throughout the regular season. And where we are now is just kind of a culmination of everything they've learned throughout that entire process. All the adversity, all the difficulty, all of the jokes that turn into celebration. All of that has finally allowed the Sabres to really lock into something really special with this team, because now they know they have that opportunity. They were getting those chances at the end of games. We saw them in the last 8 minutes of Game 1. We saw it in the final 5 minutes of Game 2 and even the back half of Game 3. But now it's no longer parts of periods or a period and a half. It is a full 60-minute 3x20 effort from the Buffalo Sabres now that they finally figured out how to do so in the playoffs. I can make the argument, and I think you can too, that the Sabres for their first 3 games were just trying to tread water. Just survive, figure it out as you go along, and advance the best you can. But now they are getting to their game in a way that has been spectacular. Even the power play has contributed. Even though Doan's goal was after the power play expired, that entire sequence was set up because of the power play. A second after it expired. But that could be the first domino to fall, at least for the man advantage. It could be a signal what's to come for the Sabres offense, because now they're figuring out how to get the bodies in tight, how to really rattle Jeremy Swayman in net to the point where he's screaming at his own players as he gets yanked for Jonas Korpisalo. It's really been a transformation of the Buffalo Sabres that's only allowed them to escalate more and more as time goes on. And now with the high that the Sabres are feeling, they're absolutely riding it. They're going to be home come Tuesday night. And the big thing that Boston has to deal with is they're going to go into the belly of the beast. They're going to go into the den of a hibernating beast that is going to be the Saberhood. These were the scenes after Game 1. Imagine them after Game 5 when there's a win in hand. When there's a series to move on to. When they actually go to round 2. Imagine what that's going to be like. Because I can say one thing for sure. Buffalo quieted TD Garden pretty darn early in Game 4. And I expect them to come out in droves for Game 5 to rally the Sabres into round 2. And I want to leave on this. For the Buffalo Sabres, they were really excellent throughout the entire playoffs so far, just in spurts. But now that they finally have found a way to take those segments, those half period, couple minute segments, and clip them together into a full 60 minutes, there's a reason why them and the Carolina Hurricanes might be the first two teams to advance from the Eastern Conference. It's because they've been the two best teams all year long. This is a matchup of styles, and one thing for sure, Boston can't skate with Buffalo, and they're not nearly as composed or as disciplined as the Sabres. And if Boston wants to continue to lose their cool, lose momentum, and ultimately lose the fight, well, that's only going to lead to Bruins losing the series. And if those all come into play, and maybe Josh Norris gets back at some point, maybe Sam Carrick gets back at some point, but you obviously have a formula here. Get the D-men involved. Find those depth guys who can contribute. Right now, that's Noah Ostlund and Josh Stone, who did a lot of that work today. But Alex Line in the back, calm, cool, composed, respected, fiery as always. And that has encapsulated himself throughout the entire Sabres roster. And once that all comes together, that full 60 minutes come Tuesday night, we might be seeing more than just a fence fall in Western New York. But it's still a long playoff. There's still a lot still to be determined. But what we do know is that the Sabres might have finally found their game. And whether it holds up for Game 5, we will see. That'll do it for all of us here at Sabres Digest. Thank you so much for joining us this entire time. I really enjoy getting a chance to talk all things Buffalo Sabres. To continue to follow along the journey, hit subscribe below. And feel free to comment too. I will absolutely read any of them. This one comes from the YouTube comment from Andy McRory. Go Sabres Go from Toronto. I actually love Toronto. It's a fantastic city. A whole bunch of family in Mississauga. And, there's a lot of love coming from the Saberhood right now. And every single piece of information, every piece of news, update, and reaction will be right here in Sabres Digest. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good one. Go Sabres.